Tonight, Ukraine under attack. Explosions shatter the dawn in Kiev as Russia launches an invasion.
Circumstances require firm and immediate action from us.
Russia has carried out strikes on our military infrastructure and border guards.
Vladimir Putin warns other countries not to interfere as Russia's actions are met with worldwide condemnation.
The Russian government launched a brutal invasion, unprovoked, on Ukraine and should be condemned for doing so.
Also tonight, the force's unforced error, more than 1,000 police officers working without valid powers. And workers in limbo as construction giant ProBuild is placed into administration. Good evening, Susie Rains with ABC News. Ukraine is a nation at war tonight after Russia launched a full-scale invasion of the former Soviet state. Russian President Vladimir Putin ignored last-minute pleas for diplomacy and launched a major military assault on several Ukrainian cities. There are scenes of chaos in the capital Kiev as residents attempt to flee. Australia is among the many nations to condemn the invasion, but Russia has warned of an instant response if anyone tries to interfere. Isabella Higgins begins our coverage from Lviv.
From the north to the south, Ukraine is under attack. Explosions were heard across the country before sunrise. This photo from the Ukrainian president's office showing an explosion in the capital. As air raid sirens rang out across Kyiv, authorities confirmed Russian troops had crossed the border into the country. This video from Ukraine's border guard showing military tanks rolling into Ukraine along its northern border with Belarus. Vladimir Putin delivered this ominous message, seemingly as the first explosion was reported.
Circumstances require firm and immediate action from us. I decided to conduct a special military operation. Anyone who tries to stop us and threaten our country and people should know Russia's response will be immediate and lead to consequences you have never faced in your history. We are ready for any outcome.
The Russian president, who called on Ukrainian troops to lay down their arms, addressed his nation just before 6 a.m. as the United Nations Security Council held an emergency meeting at the request of Ukraine.
I have only one thing to say from the bottom of my heart. President Putin, stop your troops from attacking the Ukraine. Give peace a chance.
But it was too late. As morning broke, Ukraine's president declared martial law in the country.
Dear Ukrainians, this morning President Putin announced a special military operation in the Donbass. Russia has carried out strikes on our military infrastructure and border guards. We need each of you to be calm. If possible, stay at home.
I woke up and heard a series of shots. I rushed to the balcony and realised they weren't fireworks. People were running on the street.
Ukrainian tanks were deployed across the country as the nation's leader pledged to take any assault head-on. President Biden also confirming the US will coordinate with its NATO allies to ensure a strong and united response, releasing a statement saying President Putin had chosen a premeditated war and that Russia alone is responsible for the attack. Tens of thousands of Russian and Russian-backed troops are already in the eastern Ukraine regions of Donetsk and Luhansk, but many more are stationed in Crimea in the south and across the border in Belarus, north of the capital. Reports of explosions have been recorded in at least 5 Ukrainian cities, including the capital. Ukraine's airports have also been targeted. The Ukrainian airspace is now closed to commercial flights as shelling continues dangerously near the homes of residents. Ukrainians making a last-minute dash out of the country could have a long journey ahead of them.
And Isabella Higgins is with us tonight in the city of Lviv in the west of Ukraine. Isabella, many of those people we just saw fleeing the capital are heading to where you are. Is there anywhere in Ukraine that's safe from attack?
Well, Susie, obviously Russia is an incredibly powerful military force, and we've heard that there are tens of thousands of troops on the eastern, northern and southern flanks of this country. That is air forces, ground forces, sea forces. So people are making their way to the west of the country to cities like Lviv, including embassy staff from the capital. But there have been reports of shelling all around the country, including not far from here. So there are also residents in this city who are making their own preparations. There are long lines for ATMs as people try to get cash out. We're hearing that people are doing emergency firearms training so they can be able to protect themselves. And we also have heard that already at the Polish border there are long queues. So it seems like people who can leave Ukraine are doing so.
Isabella Higgins in Lviv. We'll come back to you shortly. When the first explosions started ringing out across Ukraine, our correspondent Nick Dole was on the ground in the capital, Kiev.
We're right in the heart of the Ukrainian capital. You can probably hear that air raid siren ringing out across the city. It's the first time we've heard that. Within about 10 minutes of Vladimir Putin's speech, you could hear some explosions. We heard about 4 or 5 in the first hour and then another big one about an hour later. There is generally a sense of calm here, but we are hearing warnings now for people to bunker in. There are shelters underneath the metro here. This city has some of the deepest metros in the world. They were built by the Soviets to withstand a US strike. So people are now having to make those decisions. Do they seek shelter or do they try to get out of the city altogether? Now, the airspace is closed now, so it's going to have to be by road, and with Russia surrounding much of Ukraine, people are going to be heading mostly west to Poland. So a very difficult situation for many Ukrainians waking up. There's been a lot of anxiety over the last few weeks about exactly what a Russian strike might look like, but for many Ukrainians, their worst fears are now being realised.
Nick Dole reporting there from Kiev. The streets of the capital are becoming gridlocked as people try to leave the city. These are live pictures where it's just past 10 in the morning and -3 degrees. While Russian tanks were rolling across the border, Joe Biden was working the phones with world leaders. He briefed Ukraine's president on the United States' next moves as diplomatic efforts failed to stop Putin in his tracks. Here's North America correspondent Jade McMillan.
The UN Security Council hoped war could be averted with words.
There is no purgatory for war criminals. They go straight to hell, Ambassador.
But the pre-written pleas from diplomats were outdated as soon as they were delivered.
We're staring into the abyss of a major conflict in Ukraine, and a conflict that we know would have global implications.
Russia's attack on Ukraine is tantamount to an attack on the UN and every member state in the chamber tonight.
From the Russian representative came an alternate reality.
Those living in Donetsk and Luhansk are still sheltering in basements. The refugees are still flowing into Russia. The nature of the provocation by the Ukrainian military has not changed. You don't want to notice this, repeating the Ukrainian fairy tales.
A first round of Western sanctions failed to halt Russia's invasion plans, including Germany's decision to suspend the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline and American penalties against the company building it.
We have ensured that this is an $11 billion prize investment that is now a hunk of steel sitting at the bottom of the sea.
Are you going to toughen up sanctions, Prime Minister?
Threats from London to target Russian banks and oligarchs fell on deaf ears. Boris Johnson tweeted, President Putin has chosen a path of bloodshed and destruction by launching an unprovoked attack, warning the UK would respond decisively. Tonight, the US president is monitoring developments from the White House, praying, he says, for the Ukrainian people. For weeks, the United States has been warning of severe and unprecedented consequences if Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine. Those measures are now on the way. Within hours, President Joe Biden will meet with G7 leaders before addressing the nation to announce a new set of sanctions in coordination with Western allies. A vow to hold Russia accountable for an attack playing out almost exactly as the US had feared. Jade McMillan, ABC News, Washington.
In response to Russia's actions, Australia has unveiled new sanctions and the Prime Minister is vowing there'll be more announced in the coming days. Political reporter James Glenday joins us now from Canberra. James, what are these sanctions and will Russia care?
So, Susie, this latest round of sanctions targets about 25 Russians involved in the military, 4 banks and 4 entities also involved in the supply of arms. The Prime Minister has even foreshadowed targeting some 300 members of the Russian Parliament in the coming days. But to answer your question, will the Kremlin care? No. Probably not. But Vladimir Putin is trying to overturn the global rules that countries have lived by for decades. And Scott Morrison and many others here in Canberra believe that the way the United States, Europe and other like-minded countries respond to this now will set the tone and the blueprint for the way other egregious acts are dealt with in the coming years and even decades.
This is a chilling reminder of the world that we live in and where the threats and aggression of bullies and those who seek to intimidate others to seek their own advantage. This is a reality, which means that like-minded countries, those who believe in a world that favours freedom, need to stand together.
Scott Morrison there. And Susie, unsurprisingly, the local Ukrainian community is horrified by what it's seen today. Some are holding vigils and rallies around the country tonight, and there are again fresh calls for the Morrison government to provide more humanitarian visas for Ukrainians so that they can, if they need to, flee the country and the fighting.
James Glenday, thank you. Let's go back to Lviv in Ukraine now. Isabella Higgins is there. Isabella, if further sanctions fail to stop this invasion, what other options are left for the West?
Susie, Ukraine is not a member of the NATO military alliance, so until now Western leaders have made it very clear that they will not be sending troops into this country. So what they've been doing is been sending them into other NATO alliance countries that are in Eastern Europe, places like Romania, places like Poland, and we are hearing that the US is planning to send a large deployment now to Latvia. Now, Ukraine has made some demands of the West. They would like to see financial aid, they would like to see more weapons, they would like to see more equipment, and they would also like to see more sanctions imposed. But for now, Ukraine really stands to face the military might of Russia on its own.
Isabella Higgins in Ukraine, thank you. To the rest of the day's news now. An administrative bungle has resulted in more than 1,000 Victoria police officers going about their job without being properly sworn in. The error dates back to 2014 and casts doubt on the legality of convictions the officers were involved in. It's forced the Victorian government to draft new laws to correct the problem. Victoria Police is now holding a series of swearing-in ceremonies and says more than half the officers involved have been cleared to resume their duties. Danny Morgan reports.
For much of the past 8 years, more than 1,000 police officers have been out on the beat, carrying guns and making arrests without the proper legal authority.
This is not an ideal situation.
The situation arose through an administrative error within Victoria Police dating back to 2014.
Acting Assistant Commissioners on occasions have sworn in police officers and protective services officers without having the valid powers to do so.
The force is now scrambling to get 1,076 officers properly sworn in so they can get back to work, with many ceremonies conducted by video link.
We hope to scoop up most of them in the next couple of days.
The trickier problem, though, is what happens to the thousands of cases these officers have handled. In theory, anyone they arrested or charged could challenge the conviction. So the state government is hurriedly drafting new laws that retrospectively validate the officers' actions.
The advice that I have is that if we do this, it's passed and it's done retrospectively, it won't undermine any criminal or other actions undertaken.
If Daniel Andrews and his ministers put forward a piece of legislation which is just designed to retrospectively protect Victoria Police here in this state, we will support it.
The laws could be passed within weeks.
I'm not sure how you can retrospectively pass legislation to make something that's illegal or conduct that's illegal, legal. I don't think you can do that. And I think certainly such steps will be open to challenge. And it'll be very interesting to see what our courts say.
It's not clear who made the administrative error back in 2014 when Ken Lay was Chief Commissioner. The current Chief, Shane Patton, says finding out who is responsible is a low priority.
It's not about looking back what did or didn't occur then. We have in place those governance processes now. They're there. This won't happen again.
The force is still working out how many cases are affected. Danny Morgan, ABC News, Melbourne.
Debts and delays on a few key projects have put thousands of jobs across the nation in jeopardy as construction giant ProBuild is placed into administration. The builder is working to stay alive after its South African parent company refused to give it more money. Daniel Ziffer has more.
The reasons behind the collapse of ProBuild? A global pandemic, slow builders, soaring costs and the threat of Chinese spies.
No one tells you anything, so you just work normally and then everyone's taking their tools. We just thought everyone might be going to another job or something, but then everything makes sense now, like they're going under.
Thousands of jobs are in jeopardy after ProBuild was placed into voluntary administration late last night, with 18 large projects around the nation, most of them in Victoria. ProBuild's South African parent company has shovelled $183 million into the builder in the past 4 years. Now it's pulled the plug.
The building and construction industry has been under significant pressure for the last year or so, certainly. The cost of materials and the cost of labour have risen dramatically.
ProBuild's parent company has blamed the Australian government's hardline approach of managing COVID-19, saying the protracted effect of COVID-19 has delayed any meaningful economic recovery and procurement activity in Australia. It also blamed the government for blocking a 2020 deal to sell ProBuild to a Chinese company over concerns about national security.
When we see one of these top-tier builders entering an insolvency process, it creates a massive effect through the industry.
In a defiant statement, ProBuild said it was caught in a set of circumstances not of its making, and it would be working to continue.
Weighing on the entire industry, massive increases in the cost of materials and labour. If builders can't recoup those increases on contracts they've already signed, they'll be losing money on jobs they're years from completing. Daniel Ziffer, ABC News, Melbourne.
Still to come this hour, Rebel Labor MP Kshalia Vaghela speaks out about bullying allegations.
I was a very strong person. I was an independent woman, a very strong person before I became an MP. Within a year, I was completely destroyed. Me and my family, we have suffered a lot, and I want justice.
Plus, comprehensive coverage of the Russia-Ukraine crisis. That's coming up.
Australian cricket legend Rod Marsh is in a critical but stable condition in a Queensland hospital after suffering a heart attack. The 74-year-old was in Bundaberg for a charity event with the Bulls Masters when he was rushed to hospital this morning. A statement confirmed he is currently surrounded by some of his former teammates and will soon be joined by his family, who are making their way to Bundaberg. Prime Minister Scott Morrison says China will be watching how the West responds to Russia's aggression, but Beijing's new man in Canberra has used his first public outing to extend an olive branch to Australia, saying China is willing to go halfway to improve ties. Here's political editor Andrew Probyn.
China and Australia have had many differences in recent years. Today, they were set aside to honour one brave woman. Senior Constable Kelly Foster attempted to save Chinese student Jennifer Chi during a Blue Mountains canyoning adventure. Both women died in a whirlpool. Senior Constable Foster posthumously awarded a medal from the Chinese government.
Great love
knows no national boundaries.
China's new ambassador, Xiao Qian, has only been in Canberra for a month, but he says he's on a noble mission.
Ambassador, Andrew Probin, in the ABC. ABC? Yeah. I want you to tell us everything.
A mission to restore relations with Australia.
From the Chinese side, we're ready to work together with our Australian counterpart.
A tone far more conciliatory than his combative predecessor.
Utterly fake news.
The Cold War is over.
Beijing's long been ice cold with Australia. The banning of Huawei from the 5G network infuriated Xi Jinping's government. So did Australia's demands for an independent investigation into the origins of COVID-19 and criticism of its affairs in Hong Kong, Taiwan and Xinjiang.
Does it concern you deeply that we don't have any diplomatic channels at the moment? I'm here, so we can move this relationship back on the right track, back to the right direction.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Scott Morrison last week used Parliament to weaponise China policy ahead of the May election, claiming his opponent Anthony Albanese was Beijing's preferred candidate. But while the new ambassador has adopted a friendlier tone towards Australia, it's still unclear what China wants in return. Because whoever wins the federal election, neither side will bend on Beijing's long list of grievances. Andrew Probin, ABC News, Canberra.
Clive Palmer has been taken to hospital with COVID-19 symptoms. 3 ambulance crews were called to the mining magnate's Gold Coast home about 11 o'clock this morning. Mr Palmer's media officer says he's being retested for COVID-19 but is expected to return home this evening. The chairman of the United Australia Party has been a vocal opponent of COVID vaccinations. The Queen has spoken with British Prime Minister Boris Johnson on the phone as she continued to carry out light duties days after contracting COVID. The 95-year-old monarch cancelled all virtual engagements after testing positive several days ago at Windsor Castle. But Her Majesty spoke with Mr Johnson in keeping with the monarch's regular commitment to discuss government matters. Buckingham Palace says the Queen is experiencing mild cold-like symptoms. The Qantas chief says Omicron has pushed back the airline's recovery by 6 months, announcing what he's called a frustrating $1.3 billion loss. The pre-tax result is worse than its $1 billion loss at the same time last year. Qantas has blamed low-flying activity as a result of Delta and the emergence of Omicron. The chief executive singled out the Premier of WA, saying the decision to delay reopening that state cost Qantas $60 million.
Hopefully, we can count on the new dates and rebuild confidence in travelling to Western Australia.
The Transport Workers Union is calling for the reinstatement of the 2,000 Qantas jobs that were axed during the pandemic. To finance now, and more than $60 billion was wiped off the value of Australian shares today as Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Here's Alan Kohler.
This slide here sums up the impact on global financial markets of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The local share market volatility index is up an enormous 26%. The Russian ruble dropped 10%. Gold went up 1.8%, oil 4.5%, with North Sea Brent crude going above $100 US a barrel for the first time since September 2014, and the world share index down 1.4%. Now, the world index is now down 10% since the start of this year, making this the first real global correction since the COVID crash of February-March 2020. And here's a chart of the ruble-US dollar exchange rate. Today it fell from 1.3 American cents to 1.1 cents. Before the Russian financial crisis 24 years ago, the ruble changed hands for 20 US cents each. But on the 11th of August 1998, it fell to 4 cents overnight and has never recovered, just kept falling. And of course, today's decision to invade Ukraine won't do anything to turn that around. Not that Mr Putin is worried about that. The Australian dollar fell a bit because, unlike the ruble, the US dollar is seen as a safe haven in times of trouble and went up today. And the Australian share market fell 3%, the biggest fall in 18 months, with the nation's biggest company, BHP, down 6.7%. Banks also fell. Qantas lost 5% after reporting a $1.3 billion loss. But gold miner Newcrest jumped in response to the higher gold price, and the company formerly known as Leighton, Civic, jumped a third after its 75% shareholder Hochtief of Germany lobbed in a takeover offer valuing it at $8 billion. The US share market fell 1.8% last night, and Asian markets were also sold off today. And that's finance.
In the AFLW, there's been heartbreak for a winless St Kilda after GWS snatched victory with a goal after the siren last night. Coming off the back of a thrashing last week, the Saints put up a much better showing at Blacktown in Western Sydney. But when Cora Staunton kicked her third for the Giants, it looked like the game was slipping away. St Kilda bounced back to hit the front with 3 minutes remaining in the match with a long-range goal from Tani White. And it appeared they might hold on for their first win of the season, but a free kick and a 50-metre penalty gave the Giants a chance.
For the GWS Giants, there's the siren. She's kicked it. The Giants, they win it after the siren.
It was the first time in the AFLW a match has been won with a goal after the siren. Afghan women who fled Kabul last August are preparing for their first Australian football season in Melbourne. The refugee athletes have been reunited in a display of defiance and hope after being separated during their settlement. Paul Kennedy reports.
The challenges of finding accommodation, education and work are being overcome. Now it's time for these Afghan footballers to start playing again.
And the Oranges become the defending team.
This is a brave step for them to come forward and put their hands up and continue playing in, I suppose, defiance to the regime in Kabul.
It was the football community that helped the women escape Afghanistan when the Taliban took charge last year. They feared they'd be targeted. Lawyer Nikki Dryden, former Socceroo Craig Foster and other advocates convinced the Australian government to provide humanitarian protection. Some of the Afghanistan national players went to Europe, others came here.
As women, as footballers, they are committed to using football as a vehicle to show the world that women in Afghanistan do have a voice, and if that means being the national team in exile, that's what they wish to do.
Melbourne Victory Football Club is helping coordinate and prepare the team to compete in a division of the Victorian State League.
It's wonderful. We have the most important thing for all of us, like we have security.
A-League stars like Catherine Zimmerman and Alex Chidiak are helping with training.
To see their determination and to be able to get back on the pitch after all they've been through, and you see the unity as well, it's just amazing.
When I play with them, I'm so happy that I feel that I'm in my own country.
Behind the smiles, players are still coping with trauma.
They've got family back in Afghanistan, they're fearful for the fate of those family members.
For now, the game feels like a reprieve from the grief of the past 6 months. Paul Kennedy, ABC News, Melbourne.
Now with the weather, here's Danny Tran.
Thanks, Susie. Temperatures last night were much warmer than what we're used to for this time of year, up to 7 degrees above average in some parts of the state. Swan Hill sweltered through 27 degrees last night. During the day, maximums were up to 5 degrees above average in the state's northwest and east Gippsland, but pretty standard everywhere else. The hottest place to be today was Walpurgis, which reached 37 degrees. In the city, we hit our top of 22.7 degrees just after 2:30 this afternoon. Right now it's 21 degrees with a whopping 73% humidity. Taking a look around the country, there were showers in Sydney and Darwin, thunderstorms for Brisbane, cloud in Hobart and blue skies for Adelaide and Perth. Now, the satellite is showing extensive cloud and a few thunderstorms sitting over eastern Victoria and parts of Queensland, New South Wales and Tasmania. There's a trough sitting over Victoria, but it's on the move and we're expecting it to roll to a stop just off our eastern coast on Friday. Meanwhile, a high pressure system is building south of the Bight. Troughs are causing heavy rain across the east coast, including in Victoria. A monsoon trough is also triggering storms across northern Australia. Around the country tomorrow, there will be showers in Sydney and Brisbane, sunny skies for Perth and Adelaide. The rain will clear in Hobart and there's the chance of a thunderstorm in Darwin. Back home, and it'll be warm in the north tomorrow, mild in the south. There will be a bit of cloud over the southwest. On the other side of the state, we're expecting rain south of the ranges, as well as showers and thunderstorms in the northeast during the afternoon and evening. On the bays, 25 knots, southerlies, waves up to 1.5 metres. There's a strong wind warning tomorrow for the central Gippsland and east Gippsland coasts. And there's also a severe thunderstorm warning for people in East Gippsland Gippsland and parts of north central, northeast and west and south Gippsland. That includes areas like Omeo and Falls Creek. In Melbourne tomorrow, it'll be a cloudy day with a slight chance of a shower. 23 for Laverton, 24 for Frankston, 25 for Watsonia. In the city, we'll reach a top of 23 degrees. And taking a look at the rest of the week, Saturday 27 and cloudy, Sunday 27 possible showers, Monday 24 and rain, Tuesday 25 and showers, and Wednesday 26 and showers, Thursday 29 and cloudy. Susie?
Thanks, Danny. That's it for this evening's bulletin. Lee Sales is up next with 7:30. Good night.